Here's how I've organized my Adobe Illustrator file for the level blur Photoshop technique. On the left, I've got the line artwork that I created in Illustrator. After I made the modifications in Photoshop, I brought in the after effect here, and then I isolated 3 of the marks that I wanted to use to create just simple layouts for my animation. And since I was an Illustrator, what I did is I created 3 additional pages with this option over here. And all you have to do is you're going to click on this icon and then just click and drag a page. And then over here on the width and the height, you can just type in 800 by 600. And that gives us the dimensions that we're working with. And then if you have to line it up, you can. If you want to create more, you can actually just hold the Option key down and make additional copies. So if you want to make variations that way. So I'll get out of there. The other thing that I did is I created a simple grid in here, 5 by 5 for 25 marks. And then these correspond with each other. The way I'm going to be grading this is I'm going to take a look at the individual marks that you've created, and I'm just going to determine whether they're acceptable or not. And so if I launch my calculator, I'll do it something like this. So I'll start with 1 plus, so that would be one that's acceptable. So I'm looking at the star over here. That's not going to produce very well, or it's just causing some problems. So that needs to be reworked. So I'm going to skip that one. This second one is acceptable, so I'll just add 1 to that one. And this one's acceptable, but I had to do a little work on it over here. So in this condition, I think it's somewhat problematic, so I wouldn't have accepted that. But since I changed it and it looks better, that's what I want you to do. I want you to fix it to make sure. So there's my 2. This one looks good, so I'll accept that. This star on the underneath the first star, that's acceptable. The square next to it, that's acceptable. This little snowflake looking thing, not acceptable. I'll skip that. The pyramid looking shape at a smaller size, or rather with a thinner typeface, a lighter typeface, that actually holds up pretty good. So I'm going to accept that. The one next to that, that's acceptable. The one that's starting to look like the MasterCard logo, that's acceptable. The cube's acceptable. The sphere shaped looking space is acceptable. The hourglass one looks good. The one with multiple triangles, that's not really working that well. The one underneath the MasterCard looking logo, that's acceptable, although I don't know how I would use it, but there's nothing wrong with that. The little 3D cube looks good. What looks like a spinner, that looks good. The flame works. The flower or starfish looking one works. The one that kind of works like a camera works. And then the square within a circle, that works. The flower shape also works, and that would work with a really light typeface as well, like the pyramid would. So that's acceptable. The star looks good. It's proportionally correct. I'm not crazy about it stylistically, but it doesn't look like they have any errors. So that's acceptable. And so then 2 is the last one. So I'm just adding the points of how many were acceptable. And then I'm just going to go ahead and divide this by 25. And that would be the 84. That would be the total score. So if you want to get an A in this, you just need to go back and revisit the work to make sure that it's acceptable. So I'm going to show you real quick how I clean this one up. So I'm going to zoom in here, and I'll do a Command Y so I can see all the artwork. What I did is I selected, let me get the direct selection tool. I selected this center piece in here, and let me do an H so we can see that piece is selected. I'll do a Y now. And I enlarged it, and I just kind of looked at the rhythm of how this thing was increasing in relationship to these little square blocks over here. And so I'm going to hide the selection, and now I'm going to double click on the scale tool, and I just increased it by 105, and then I go ahead and hit OK, And now every time I do a Command D, it gets bigger. And so I'm just doing Command D over and over again till it gets to about the size that I want. If I overshoot it and it looks way too big, then just doing a Command Z will back me up, back it off so I can go ahead and try to size it. And so what I was looking at was the width or the length of these little brick looking spaces, and I was making mods in according to that. And that's essentially what I did for the mark. So let me come back over here. That's this one over here. So that's the fixed up version. The other thing I did is I made the stroke a little bit thinner. You can see that this might look a little thick. And the way I did that, let me do a Command Y. What I did is I clicked on the edge with my direct selection tool here. Let me get that. And I'm only selecting that edge. I'm going to do a Y so we can see what I'm selecting. I'm rather an H. And you can see that that's what I'm doing. So I'm holding the Option key down and I'm clicking on that whole stroke. I got that whole line. I'm going to do a Command C for copy. And now I'm going to do a paste in place. So File, Edit, Paste in place, this one. And so it's there. And I'm going to reverse. I'm going to set this to a white solid, reverse that out. So now I'm dealing with a white stroke. And I'm going to get rid of the fill on here. So no stroke on here. Now we'll do a Y so we can see what this is looking like. I'm going to do a Command H to hide the selection. And now I'm just going to slowly mess with the stroke. So in here you can see that I can change the width and modify it. And once I get it to where I want it, a little bit thinner, then what I'll do is I'll go ahead and select the stroke that I'm working with. I'll go to the Object drop-down menu. I'll slide down to Path, and I'm going to make a shape out of the path. So Outline Stroke. And so that generates that there. So now there's a shape on top of this. And now I can select, I'm going to do Command H so we can see the lines that I'm selecting. So now I'm just going to click and drag over here with the Option key down. And I'm going to go to my Pathfinder tool. I'm going to open that up. And I'm going to do a minus front. I'm going to do a Command H. Well, actually, I'll just do minus front. And we'll see that front end go away. And that whittled the whole thing down so it's a lot thinner than the original was. And so I just cleaned it up that way so that it looked proportionally correct to me. And then I ended up with this one over here. The typeface that I'm choosing, this is Caslon. It's a typeface that was designed in the 1700s, and this had this kind of ornate quality to it. It looked kind of like a finial type detail, so I thought it made sense to have an older typeface involved with that. Over here, I've got Futura, I believe it is. Yeah, Futura Extra Bold, and I like the roundness of this shape. And down in here, I've got Gotham, very popular typeface right now. The other thing I did is I generated a list of forgotten names or names that are starting to fall by the wayside. And I just use those as references to figure out which names might be able to go with my mark. So that's what was going on in there. So you can go to this website or do a Google search for 100 of the rarest last names in the U.S. as of the 2010 census. Okay, so that's how the file was set up. And I'm going to go ahead and do a revert to get it back to where it was. Okay, and now we're going to go to the desktop and see how it's set up in here. So in here, this is for the level brush part of the project. 3 animations are going to be due, and those are the 3 images that I've already isolated in the Illustrator file. These folders are empty right now, but I'll be putting in logo 1, 2, and 3 in here. And this is my Illustrator file, the one that I just showed you, and it's got the different pages in here. That's the way that's set up. Okay, so I'll do what I think is going to be the easy one first, which I think is this one over here. So I'm going to grab my selection tool, select everything. I'll do an H, Command H so we can see what I have selected. Do Command C for copy. I'm going to move on over to Animate and do File New. And the dimensions are 800 by 600, 30 frames per second, HTML5. So you can go with the medium size. Go ahead and hit Create. And now I'm going to do a Command V. And because the pixel size was exactly the same size as my Illustrator file, these are going to come in the same way. So I want to apply the recommended fixes. Hit OK. And so there it is. So for my eye, it looks like it could go a little bit higher, and that could have been an issue in Illustrator as well. So that looks about right. Okay, so once you get your artwork, we want to animate the mark and the typography separately. I think this one lends itself to a translation where this is moving horizontally along this line and this is moving vertically. So I'm going to have the square come down and settle in here, and then I'm going to have the Michaelberg come over here from the right to the left. So first things first, you need to remember that for every animation, you have to have its own layer for that animation. So I'm going to do that right now. I'll do a Command-Shift-D, and then that separates out my mark and my type. And so let's see which one's which. So this is the logo on top. And this is the text. Okay. All right, so I'm going to click and drag both of them at the same time. I'm going to go to the Insert drop-down menu and slide down to Classic Tween. It wants to convert these into symbols, graphic symbols. I'll go ahead and hit OK. In the library, we can see that we got, this is the icon for a graphic symbol. We got 1 and 2. So number 1 is the logo, and number 2 is the text box. We can now animate those. So I'm going to make this animation last 60 frames. I'm going to click straight down like that, and I'm going to do an F6 right in here. Or you can do a right click and select Convert to Keyframe. There's the F6. Okay, so that's going to be the animation. Okay, so I'm going to take this keyframe over here. This is the logo frame. I want it to get to the to where it's supposed to arrive before the text does. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to slide it over to frame 40. Okay, so now I'm going to go to where it starts from. This is where the first frame is, where it's starting from. And I'm going to take this and I'm just going to slide it up. I'm holding the Shift key down to constrain this so this falls in place. So it's just going to come in like that. And then now I'm going to want my typography to show up as well. So this, I don't want it to be there. So I'm going to move it out of the way, and I'm going to move it way over here to frame 40. And now I'm going to click on my type here. I'm in frame 40. And I'm going to slide this. Again, I'm holding onto the Shift key, and I'm moving that out of the way. And so this is what the animation is going to look like. Just hit return on here. It's going to come down, and then this shows up. Now, this is moving really fast, and the reason is because it's got more ground to cover within a smaller amount of time. If I want to slow it down, I can take both of these and move this like to frame 30. And so now this is going to be, you can see that it comes in almost about the same time. So if you want to slow it down even more so, you can elongate this animation. So if you drag this out maybe to 80, and now over here I need to extend my logo because it disappears. It's only right there. So over here I'm going to insert a frame. It's not a keyframe. It's just going to be this same type of frame that's over here. So insert frame, or if you remember, you can do an F5, and that drops it in. So let's see what this looks like. Do a command return. It opened up in my other window. Give me a second here. So here's what it looks like. Okay, so let's fix the animation here. So I'm going to click on the dock. I'm going to go to more settings. I'm going to center this on the stage, both angles. And instead of making the background gray the way I've been doing in class, I'm going to give myself a stroke that goes all the way around the frame. So let me first pull my output window out here, and I'm going to move it down here so it's out of the way. Okay, so if I need to see it, I can come back over here and open this tab up. All right. Okay, so here's what I want to do. I want to create a brand new layer with plus, and I'll go ahead and call this keyline. Okay, and I'm going to go back to the very first frame, and I'm going to click on here. This is an empty frame, and this is out of the way, but this frame is empty. Okay, so I'm going to select my rectangle tool, and I don't want to fill, so it's just going to be a stroke. Black is what I want. I'm going to hold the Option key down or Alt key, and I'm going to click, and I'm going to make this the same dimensions as my stage, which is 800 by 600. If yours doesn't say that, just go ahead and change it to those dimensions. Hit OK. That puts this lined artwork. I'm going to select it now, so I'm going to click on here, double click, and I've got the whole rectangle selected. And now over here in the properties of the location of this object, I'm going to change its X position to 0 and 0. And that moves it up into the upper left-hand corner. And if I do a command return now, we'll see that it's centered, and now we've got that hairline, so we can see this separate out. Okay, so now I need to throw in a stop, and that means another layer. And I'll go ahead and call this actions, and I'll go to the very end of the animation, and I want the stop to locate itself right in here at frame 80. So I'm going to insert a keyframe or do an F6. Now I want to edit that and put in my stop, so I'll go to actions, and it's going to bring in my coding dialog box, and I'm going to type in the word this, which is referring to the canvas, this canvas that we're currently in. I want it to stop. Open and close parentheses is the syntax. So this is kind of like the subject. This is the verb, what it does. And if there was an option to, like, say we wanted it to go to a particular frame, you would type in the frame number if you were using that command, like go to and stop at frame whatever number you're using. Stop just stops. It doesn't have any options. It's either on or off, but you still have to type it in the way you would for a conventional call out to the timeline. So now we're going to run this. It's going to play, and it's going to come into where it's supposed to be. That's good. Now I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to go to the beginning of the, this is the, click over here. I'm going to click right there on that frame. That's the beginning of the animation for this, for the logo mark. And I'm going to have it slowly come in, and then it's going to hit fast, and that's just to show you how to set that up. So here's classic ease. So I want it to start off really slow, so it's going to be a negative number. Actually, I want to start off fast first. So let's see what that looks like. You'll see, and then it comes. Let's do a reload. You can see it slow down. It's coming in fast, and then it slows down. So let's come back over here, click on the frame over here. If I go start off slow, negative number, now it's going to hit fast. It's going to move slowly and slowly gain speed. And you can see it almost feels like it's got a clunk to it. I actually like it. I think it looks better if the number starts off big and comes to a soft landing. And I want to do the same thing to the text. So I'm going to click on the text frame over here. And over here I want this to start off fast and then slow down. So it's going to start off fast, and then it's going to come in for a soft landing. So this is what our animation looks like. Now, the animation relates to the shapes. That's the key principle here. Whatever we're invoking in relationship to the animation, or rather to the graphics, I chose this typeface specifically. This is Gotham. I like the squareness of this, and I like the idea that we're working almost the equivalent with an M square type space, and the M came in here with the name. So I chose this so that there's conceptual relationship between the box, the letter M, the boxiness of the typeface, and then the animation is about horizontals and verticals, as is the logo mark. And so there's a relationship of the logo to this. Okay, so I'm going to make another movie. We'll bring in the animation for the, what was it called? The Suko, and we'll do that one next.